An old Whig number 4, Philadelphia Independent Gazetteer, October 27th, 1787. An old Whig number 4. In this country, perhaps, we are possessed of more than our share of political virtue. If we will exercise a little patience and bestow our best endeavors on the business, I do not think it impossible that we may yet form a federal constitution much superior to any form of government which has ever existed in the world. But whenever this important work shall be accomplished, I venture to pronounce that it will not be done without a careful attention to the framing of a Bill of Rights. Much has been said and written on the subject of a Bill of Rights, possibly without sufficient attention to the necessity of conveying distinct and precise ideas of the true meaning of a Bill of Rights. Your readers, I hope, will excuse me if I conclude this letter with an attempt to throw some light on this subject. Men, when they enter into society, yield up a part of their natural liberty for the sake of being protected by the government. If they yield up all their natural rights, they are absolute slaves to their governors. If they yield up less than is necessary, the government is so feeble that it cannot protect them. To yield up so much as is necessary for the purposes of government and to retain all beyond what is necessary is the great point which ought, if possible, to be attained in the formation of a constitution. At the same time that by these means the liberty of the subject is secured, the government is really strengthened, because wherever the subject is convinced that nothing more is required from him than what is necessary for the good of the community, he yields a cheerful obedience which is more useful than the constrained service of slaves. To define what portion of his natural liberty the subject shall at all times be entitled to retain is one great end of a Bill of Rights. To these may be added in a Bill of Rights some particular engagements of protection on the part of government. Without such a Bill of Rights firmly securing the privileges of the subject, the government is always in danger of degenerating into tyranny. For it is certainly true, in establishing the powers of government, the rulers are invested with every right and authority which is not in explicit terms reserved. Hence it is that we find the rulers so often lording over the people at their will and pleasure. Hence it is that we find the patriots in all ages of the world so very solicitous to obtain explicit engagements from their rulers, stipulating expressly for the preservation of particular rights and privileges. In different nations, we find different grants or reservations of privileges appealed to in the struggles between the rulers and the people, many of which in the different nations of Europe have long since been swallowed up and lost by time or destroyed by the arbitrary hand of power. In England, we find the people, with the barons at their head, exacting a solemn resignation of their rights from King John in their celebrated Magna Carta of 1215, which was many times renewed in Parliament during the reigns of his successors. The Petition of Rights, 1628, was afterwards consented to by Charles I and contained a declaration of the liberties of the people. The Habeas Corpus Act, after the restoration of Charles II, 1679, the Bill of Rights, 1689, which was obtained from the Prince and Princess of Orange on their ascent to the throne, and the Act of Settlement, 1701, at the accession of the Hanover family, are other instances to show the care and watchfulness of that nation to improve every opportunity of the reign of a weak prince or the revolution in their government to obtain the most explicit declarations in favor of their liberties. In like manner, the people of this country at the revolution, having all power in their own hands in forming the constitutions of the several states, took care to secure themselves by bills of rights so as to prevent as far as possible the encroachments of their future rulers upon the rights of the people. Some of these rights are said to be unalienable, such as the rights of conscience, yet even these have been often invaded where they have not been carefully secured by express and solemn bills and declarations in their favor. Before we establish a government whose acts will be the supreme law of the land and whose power will extend to almost every case without exception, we ought carefully to guard ourselves by a Bill of Rights against the invasion of those liberties which it is essential for us to retain which it is of no real use to government to strip us of, but which in the course of human events have been too often insulted with all the wantonness of an idle barbarity. Brutus number 2 coming up November 1st, 1787, New York Journal. To the citizens of the state of New York.